Ciao everyone and welcome back to another episode of Learn Italian with Songs. Today we are going to start a mini series, if we want to call it like that, because I received a very peculiar request. Normally I take single requests, we can call them like that, and they concern single songs. So, what do I mean with that? Usually, someone comes in the comments or in Discord and says, okay, can we talk about this song by this artist? Or we have some exceptions, like, for example, Sanremo, but because Sanremo, it is a cultural music festival in Italy, so it is a very good example of what's up in the country during that year. But normally I take requests for one song for each person or a bunch of songs from different artists. This that we are going to start today is going to be a little bit of an exception because I received a request to analyze not one song by an artist, but a whole album by a band. And I'm talking about Natura Morta by Folkstone, an Italian metal band. Now, why did I accept this? First of all, because one of the most loyal community members asked me to. So, due to their loyalty, it is a little bit of a privilege to ask such thing, but also because of the quality of the album and the type of the album. Because metal bands tend to write lyrics, at least I'm speaking for the Italian metal bands I know, that are more poetic, okay? And in fact, the lyrics that we are going to analyze concerning the songs composing this album are going to be closer to poems than the classic pop lyrics, right? So, since this is the first track of the album, and the title is Alabastro, we are going, however, to introduce first and foremost Natura Morta, which is the whole album, because the whole album shares a point of view, if you will, a common thread, okay? So, let's start by the title. The title of the album is Natura Morta, still life, that's the meaning. However, in Italian, Natura Morta, so those paintings representing generally fruits, okay, literally translates from the Italian as dead nature, okay? Because we are talking about fruit, flower, products or things related to nature that are dead because they got picked up, okay? So, what is this album about? It wasn't easy because this is very niche, but I managed to find, say, some statements. So, what is this album about? Fundamentally, it is a portrait of what we are today. And here the members of the band, because it is a band, Folkstone, are talking. And about those things and events that marked us, so that changed and influenced us. A portrait mainly of quotidianity, so daily activities, gifted to us by every day, concerning good things and bad things, with their nuances and their colors. We tried to put in our songs, and thus lyrics, as well, besides the music, what we live every day. We wanted to communicate more than a message and judgment. We wanted to transmit, to communicate our emotions. In the album, there are beginnings, incipits, concerning what is happening in Ukraine and in the Mediterranean Sea. For now, history goes on in a way not positive at all. And people generally try to give a message of hope and effort, as in hoping to reach a better life. So basically, the idea is a hopeful point of view, the point of view of the artist, in this case, trying to communicate hope for a better future. Our still life, because of course there are several versions of still life in art, is a point of view lost in life. A sense of disorder, as in opposite of order, so more chaos, mystical chaos, and a good dose of disillusion, born by a constant and self-critical reflections, self-awareness. Always with a smile on the lips. Always aware of everyday life and reality. So marvelous, but also struggling at the same moment. We are in the epoch, in the era of full-on materialism. We want to share a cry, a desperate scream, but romantic. Romantic more in an artistic way than romantic as love related, so with a more decadent nuance in the meaning. In the album, there are also 2 featurings, or 3. More actually 4. Okay, it should be 4. Anyway, several featuring. We are going to see them one by one when they are going to occur. So the featuring were born from the need to collaborate with someone that could give a touch, an artistic touch from their own to our tracks, to our songs. But this person also have an affinity with our music and our way to live music, which makes sense because if you do a featuring, yes, I know that there are many featuring that happen just because of money, but in this case, we are talking about a niche genre and also a niche band. So, of course, they needed someone sharing the same or at least comparable point of view on both life and the music, right? From there, we thought, since we want to realize this, so to have a comparability with our featuring artist, we thought about Modena City Ramblers, Pancreas, Daridel, and Trevolsarist, who are our sides of political music. And in fact, we'll see that there are some tracks that are more existential, so they are more a criticism against this era, against how modern life is, so more general, more ideal. And then we are going to have other tracks mainly the one made in featuring with other artists that are explicitly political, more or less. And I already need to drink because stay hydrated is important. So, generally, in a nutshell, the album, yes, has specific political views, but more generally, it is about the emotions born by looking at life as it is nowadays, with the positive aspects, but also the negative aspects. That said, we can start talking about Alabastro, which is the first track that we are going to analyze today. So, Alabastro. Title of the song, translated very easily, Alabaster. What is alabaster as a material? Because alabaster is a material. So, alabaster is a mineral and a soft rock used for carvings and as a source of a plaster powder. So, it is a construction material, usually quite expensive, or at least considered precious. So, not like a brick, to put it in perspective, more like a marble, we can say like that. It is smooth, cold, and pale, and often we find it in statues and urns. This is important because this term is going to come back in the chorus of the song, and we will understand why this material gives the name to the track. Generally, just to give you an idea and prepare you a little bit, it is a poetic and symbolic journey through emotional exile, inner fragmentation, and longing for transcendence. So it is about not being okay in your own skin and wanting to change, with a little bit of that feeling that you feel when you want to escape, to run away. So, let's dive into the lyrics. You will see that some words are sign in gray. These words are in Latin. It is quite common, at least in my experience, to see Latin used in metal songs. So I'm going to explain. Don't worry. Let's start with the first verse. Delirium. Delirium, which is madness. It means madness. It is a word we have also in English, and it is taken directly from Latin, and it means delirium or madness. La gravità che leggera trascina giù. Gravity, the gravity in Italian, that light or lightly drags you down. Again, delirium. Germoglia l'altro che ignoro d'essere. Sprouts the other, so the other sprouts, the other that I ignore to be. E come calce viva, and like quicklime, corroderò, I will corrode. Suspirium, sigh, as in a groan, but also a labor breathing. Okay, so when we do, which in Italian would be sospiro, io sono forma senza più linee. I am shape without lines anymore. Brividi d'essenze e gemiti. Shivers of essences and moans. So, as you can see, at first glance, the lyrics is not as immediate as a pop song. We analyzed many of them, and probably even a native speaker, by reading this or listening to this, would be like, I have no clue what they are saying. That's why I was explaining in introduction that the lyrics we are going to analyze are probably closer to a poem than what we would expect from a commercial lyric song, okay? So, as I said, we have a bunch of Latin words, delirium and suspirium, specifically here. Now, you see that there are peculiar signs on the vowels because in Latin you have long and short vowels. I really appreciate when, first of all, artists publish the official lyrics because it makes my job much easier. And also when they use Latin, but they use it properly because sometimes a long or short vowel can change the meaning of the word. Yes, it is that complex. So in this case, and it is also very good pronounced because delirium, because the E and the I, the first two, are long, while the last I is short. And in fact, if you pay attention, this pronunciation, it is matched in the song. As I said, in English, delirium was pretty much adopted and kept. It is not that common of a word, I understand, but to put it in perspective, it means madness. So we start with a very specific word. As I usually say, when you write songs, the first word or the first line counts because it is your business card presenting the song to the audience. And the first word and line we find in this song and the album, because we also have to keep in mind that this is the start of the album, it is delirium. Madness. So we could say that throughout the whole album, and the song of course, one at least of the keywords will be madness. So how would the artist describe today's world as madness, which is a fair take? Then we have gravity that light drags down. So, la gravità, the gravity, che leggera, that lightly, leggera is an adjective, trascina giù, drags down. Who, what, probably pretty much everything, but the point is not the literal meaning. The point is the paradox. Okay, why? Because we have gravity that, conceptually speaking, is related to something that oppresses you, that drags you down, but in this case it is light. So it evokes a little bit a chaos that lightly is dragging you down, oppressing you, without really making you notice. Ok? Again, delirium. Germoglia l'altro che ignoro d'essere. D'essere, it is the truncated form of di essere. Sorry, the elided form. The other sprouts. The other that I ignore to be. So we have this sense of madness, this sense of weird, disorienting, paradoxical oppression, and we have a sense of self that is being split because we feel something growing within us, but that something it is perceived as something else. It is not something we perceive as our own. It is something that we perceive as alien, as coming from outside. It is not us. E come calce viva, and like quicklime corroderò. I will corrode. So what is the so-called calce viva? Now, in English, it is called quicklime. Lime is calce. In English is quick lime. In Italian is calce viva. Lime, alive lime. Why? Okay, the quicklime is calcium oxide, and in Italian is called calce viva live lime because it is extremely highly reactive. And usually, ideally, this calcium oxide represent decomposition and transformation. And in fact, what does it do? It corrodes. When you corrode something, that something falls apart, is being destroyed. And then we have suspirium, which is another Latin word. You don't really have it. English didn't really adopt any word related to this, I guess, but I'm not sure. Not at least in the colloquial vocabulary. In Italian, however, we have something because we have sospiro, which comes directly from suspirium. Sospiro is the sigh. So when you do, okay. Now, in Latin, however, can have several meanings. It can be the sighed groan, so like when something is annoying you, right? It can also be the labored breathing. So when you cannot breathe, which would match the idea of being oppressed we were talking about before. In poems, more specifically, it can mean breathing during a pause or a truce, okay? So we have this duality of meaning, the difficulty of breathing because feeling oppressed, but also having like some breathing moment, some breathing room, okay? So positive, a moment to take a breath, ok? Io sono forma senza più linee. I am shape without lines anymore. Once again, the theme of identity, it is very present in this song. And in fact, we have this representation of the loss of identity because yes, I am shape, so there is something, but I don't have the lines containing me. Now, this again can be something good, can be something bad. It is basically the idea of changing. You are losing yourself, yes, but it can be positive because change can also mean evolution. So you have this double point of view of, as we said in the introduction, positive and negative, because you have the idea of change, which can be positive because it is development, because it's changing as it progresses, okay? But it is also losing what you were, a change of identity, losing an identity. One of the reasons why this scares us so much as humankind. And then we close the first verse with brividi d'essenze, another elision, and e gemiti, shiver of essences and moans. Now, here again, we have an image very evocative, almost as being born again. So the essence, the essenza in Italian is what we are. Generally, an essence is the extraction of the core of something. Brividi, shiver, something that can be good, something that can be bad. A shiver, it is a natural reaction of our body that can happen in positive moments, like having an intercourse, for example, or another something negative, like being afraid of something. Shivers are a natural response of several things that can happen in life. Once again, we have the duality of the positive and the negative. And moans, probably also a reference to something that can be associated to something positive, as I said, an intercourse, for example, or something negative, for example, pain. Shivers and moans are both two things that can happen in positive context and negative context. Blaue, as I said, you either explain me why you are requesting such a song, or I'm not going to take it into consideration. With love, of course. And then we have the chorus. Perché io non ritorno? Because I don't come back. Perso in Babilonia, lost in Babylon, il mio cuore alabastro, like the title of the song, senza alcuna poesia. My alabaster heart without any poetry. Lasciami andar via. Let me go. Perché io non mi pento, because I don't regret, as in what I've done. I don't repent, if you will. Un bagliore caldo, a warm glow. Il mio cuore randagio sopra un mondo di piombo, my wanderer heart over a world of lead. Lasciami andar via. Let me go. Okay, Blaue, then I accept it. I will put it on the list. So, here I need to check some longer notes, because here the situation becomes even more complex. So, let's start with Babylonia. Lost in Babylonia, okay? Now, Babylon was an ancient city located on the lower Euphrates River in southern Mesopotamia, within modern-day Ila in Iraq, about 85 kilometers south of modern-day Baghdad. This is to have a bunch of, how can I say, a bunch of a historical and geographical info. Now, in the Bible, especially in the book of Revelation, Babylon represents several things. First of all, moral corruption and decadence, because there are several references to what is called the Whore of Babylon. Oppression and idolatry. Powerful empire that oppresses God, often interpreted metaphorically as any corrupt political or religious power. Even more, in Christian eschatology, Babylon can symbolize Rome or more broadly, any society seen as a godless or oppressive. However, Babylon was also a real ancient city in Mesopotamia, as I said, in modern day Iraq, known for the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 ancient wonders, rich culture and science, and so a representation of something positive. Once again, we have the negative, so a symbol of corruption, and something positive, a symbol of culture development, change in positive. Okay. What about literature, music, and film? Well, it can represent decadence and downfall, like the fall of a great civilization, alienation of or a spiritual exile, one of the theme of the song, but also a critique of modern society. Once again, we have the symbolic, the positive, and the negative. So, concerning decadence and the downfall, we have examples, for example, in The Great Gatsby by Fitzgerald, with wealth, opulence, but also moral emptiness. And then we have, for example, Intolerance, a Griffiths movie, featuring Babylon as a metaphor for failed empires brought down by cruelty and pride. Then we said about alienation and spiritual exile. It can also symbolize, in fact, a world where individuals feel disconnected from meaning or identity. Sounds familiar? Slight criticism to the nowadays technology, maybe. So, we have drawing from the Jewish Babylonian exile. It's a place where people are far from their spiritual home. In modern terms, it represents life in a system or city that feels artificial, oppressive, and morally corrupted, or at least problematic. For example, in Bob Marley's music, Babylon is the Western world's corrupt system that alienates people from their roots. In Blade Runner and Matrix, Babylonian themes of spiritual exile and dystopian dehumanized society. And in fact, as we said, it can also be seen as a critique of modern societies, generally speaking, because it is in several cases, it is used as a way to provide a metaphor for the decay of civilizations, but also contemporary political and economical systems. So, again, we have mainly an idea related to something negative, okay? But it can also mean something positive, as in development. Now, seeing everything in its complex, we could say that probably here Folkstone are hinting at generally technological development, because it can be bringer of positive features, because of course technology brings development and progress, for example, I don't know, in medicine and whatnot. But it can also provide issues. Any instrument, okay, any tool is by definition neutral. It all depends how you use it. Of course, if you abuse it, it becomes a problem. And then we have, as we said, Il mio cuore alabastro, the title of the song, senza alcuna poesia. And now it's more clear. We, the artist picked a material that is cold, lifeless, pale, without colors, okay? Used for statues and urns without any poetry. So here, this metaphor, it is a little bit more explicit because we are talking about a heart. You know what symbolizes for human. The heart is like our core, our source of feelings. It's not like that, anatomically speaking, yes, but symbolically it is. So what does it mean that our heart is poetryless, is left without any poetry? That we lost our emotions, we lost a bit our humanity, okay? We are becoming cold. And then we have lasciami andar via. So once again, a desire to escape from a broken, meaningless, cold world. Perché io non mi pento, un bagliore caldo, il mio cuore randagio sopra un mondo di piombo, lasciami andar via, once again. Because I don't repent, a warm glow, my wanderer heart, the heart again, over a world of lead. And here about lead, we have once again many meanings, many possible interpretations. So, first of all, let's think about it materially speaking. So, let's think about the material, the lead. Lead is heavy. And again, this heaviness, like it is literally heavy, this heaviness might be connected once again to idea of the oppression that we met already in the song. However, if and here we have the negative part. The other negative part, it is often related to poison and corruption, because lead, for example, can corrupt water and poison human beings, okay? It is also used to refer to weapons, because originally projectiles, so like ammunitions, were made of lead. So here we have the negative aspect. But once again, we have a little bit more positive aspect, which is found in the alchemical meaning of lead. In fact, lead in alchemy, this is not science, I'm talking about alchemy, so we are talking about symbology, okay? It is the base metal to perform the transmutation into gold. So we are talking once again about a change, about a transformation in something better, represented by the gold. So we go from something poisonous, heavy, like ideally related to the idea of oppression, of corruption, of poisoning, sickness, but the idea is to transform it in something precious like gold, in something better. And then we have the second verse. Delirium, once again, nel mio palazzo giare d'effimero. In my palace jars of ephemeral. Suspirium, sigh, 2 monete per gli occhi che dormono, 2 coins for the eyes that sleep. Tinte soffuse dai vetri rotti fumè. suffused hues from broken smoky glass. Once again, we start with madness once again. In my palace, jars of ephemeral. So we are mentioning these jars, this container, full of what? Normally in jars you put something precious. But is it truly precious what I keep in my jars, in my safes? Not really, because everything I have there, it is ephemeral, temporary, fleeting, superficial, if you will. Then once again, we have suspirium, which I forgot to highlight in gray. And then 2 monete per gli occhi che dormono, 2 coins for the eyes that sleep. This is a reference to ancient mythology, or generally ancient traditions, more likely, because covering the eyes of deceased with 2 coins, it was very common in many pagan rituals, mainly in Roman and Greek traditions. At least since the 8th century before Christ. The ancient Greeks use, however, many say, oh, the Greeks. Actually, the Greeks were doing that a little bit different, because the idea was that they were putting 1 coin, so not 2 for the eyes, but only 1, and they were putting in the mouth, often under the tongue, when someone was dying. Why? Because in many mythologies, now I'm mainly speaking about the ancient Greek one, when someone died, they had to go into the Hades, which is not hell, it is not heaven, it was simply the afterlife. The idea is that if the souls were good souls, they were destined to wander in the Hades and reach a certain point, the Lethe River. They had to drink from it, forget everything about their past. So basically the river was washing the experience and their memories away from the soul, so that the soul could be reborn. And if the soul was, however, evil, let's put it like that, it was condemned to the Tartarus. Now, problem, if we can say it like that. Hades, in ancient Greek mythology, was full of rivers, like very important, you have no clue. And the first step to reach the Hades was to cross the Styx, I guess. I don't remember all the names of the rivers. Anyway, there was this first river you had to cross, but there was only one way to cross it, and it was to pay Charon to make you cross from one bank to the other. Question: how do you pay Charon to do this trip? You had to pay with a obolus. It was a very low price because the idea was more symbolic for the payment. And also everyone was able to afford paying an obolus. It was like giving 1 cent, okay, to put it in perspective. So normally everyone would have been able to put an obolus for their beloved one passed. So the idea was that the soul was taking out from the mouth the obolus, giving it to Charon, and being transported in the proper afterlife. The part before was a sort of pre-afterlife. So they could go to the rest of the Hades until the Lethe River, as I explained. So we are talking about this eye that sleep, because we are referencing someone who is resting in peace, if you will. And again, we have these 2 coins. Why? Probably because here the criticism is a little bit against the materialism characterizing this era. Because we are pretty much focused on money. Some countries more than others and some cultures more than others. But the importance money have in our society nowadays, pretty much in the whole world, it is undeniable. And in fact, we are talking about these two coins on the eyes, so covering the eyes. We could also interpret this as a metaphor for money clouding your judgment, covering your eyes. And then, in fact, we are going to talk about suffused hues from broken smoky glass. What does it mean, suffused? It indicates something that is gradually spread through or over something else. So, clouding it, just like smoke does on glass. So, the idea is to have broken, smoky glass distorting reality. Everything is filtered through a damaged and dim lens, just like having money on your eyes. Now, again, this is my interpretation, but it fits, the logic fits. Then we have once again the chorus, perché io non ritorno perso in Babilonia, il mio cuore alabastro senza alcuna poesia, lasciami andar via. Because I don't come back, lost in Babylon, my alabaster heart without any poetry, let me go. Perché io non mi pento, because I don't repent, un bagliore caldo, il mio cuore randagio sopra un mondo di piombo, lasciami andar via. Because I don't regret, a warm glow, my wanderer heart over a world of lead, let me go. Then we have a bridge that is connecting the second chorus to the third and last one with a little variation that also function as a outro, and the bridge is fully instrumental, so we go to the variation of the chorus. The first portion is the same, perché io non ritorno, perso in Babilonia, il mio cuore alabastro senza alcuna poesia, lasciami andar via. Because I don't come back, lost in Babylon, my alabaster heart without any poetry, let me go. And then we have once again, perché io non mi pento, un bagliore caldo. Because I don't regret, I don't repent, a warm glow. But then we have a change in the last two lines. Il mio cuore randagio in un altro universo, my wanderer heart in another universe, si specchia nelle stelle e naviga, is mirrored in the stars and sails. What could these two lines mean? Now, once again, the idea here is very poetic and symbolic, so my interpretation is basically transcendence. So, this wanderer heart leaves his lost, cold place in this symbol of corruption in Babylon, which probably represents our world, and goes from there to another universe. In this universe, it is mirroring the stars, so something that is often used to represent the heavens, so something better, okay? And sails and naviga and sails and wander again. Again, so this transcendence, this change would be the change hinted throughout the whole song, and it could represent in the end a spiritual liberation and a rebirth. So this idea of the change told pretty much in the whole song. So, in the end, what could be the meaning as a whole. My opinion could be a representation of nowadays society and world where we reached a point where we are incredibly developed because our level of technology is at very high level, but it is often misused. We are in fact focusing on the wrong things, like getting richer and richer. This distortion creates a feeling of oppression that destroys us. Thus, we need to change, we need to elevate and aim to a hopeful and better future. This is how I would describe in a nutshell the meaning of this song. Now, this was the first track of Natura Morta by Folkstone, Alabastro. Next time we are going to talk about the second track of Folkstone, of Natura Morta by Folkstone, which is titled Appennino. I know that was a bit complex, so I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. That said, grazie everyone for watching. Let me know what you think about this song in the comment section and arrivederci.